Hello and welcome to Overdrive. I'm Shireen Band. Let's start the show with a hatchback that's been creating a lot of buzz since it was unveiled in the capital last year. That's right, we are talking about the Datsun GO. We've talked about its looks, we've talked about its potential price point. Now Rohit finally managed to get his hands on the wheel, and here's his opinion on first drive.
Standing next to me is the GO hatchback. Now, in all probability, you have already seen this car at various Nissan showrooms, or maybe at customer feedback clinics, or even at the 2014 Auto Expo if you are enthusiastic enough. Now, I'm in Hyderabad to finally drive the GO, but even before I do, I can tell you that this is a very important offering. The GO hatchback has the colossal responsibility of resurrecting the Datsun brand, an iconic Japanese marquee that in 1986 dissolved into what we know today as Nissan. And because this is a very important car, it shares its name with a 100-year-old vehicle called the DAT GO, the car that gave birth to the Datsun lineage. Now the earth has changed sides over a zillion times in these 100 years, and so have the design preferences. The current trends are visible in the GO's exterior design. Like the large headlamps or the wraparound taillights, those Fox air dams, they all have an angular design theme. And hexagonal grills, that seems to be the flavor of the season right now, but Datsun's design has enough variation to stand out from the crowd. There are four important creases on this car. The first is the shoulder line that originates from the headlamps. The second is the buttress that follows over the roof handle and cuts into the taillights. The most prominent creases are the ones on the tailgate, which adds a sophisticated touch to the GO hatchback. Also, that loading lift for the boot lid is quite high, which seems to be a convenient design feature. Overall, these are subtle creases and aren't very distinct if you opt for a lighter shade of the GO. The GO is a fairly large hatchback for the segment that it is targeting. In fact, it is marginally narrower but longer than the Micra. And apart from these tiny 13-inch wheels, the overall design looks quite balanced. It is neither too radical nor too simple. The vehicle comes across as something that is smart and trendy, and that should help the GO's cause. Now, contrary to the exteriors, the interiors are bound to take you on a nostalgic trip, because this is how you adjust the mirrors. That's very 1980s, and the handbrake, well, that's the umbrella type. That's from the 90s, and the seat belt, the front one gets a pre-tensioner, the rear one doesn't. That feels like it came from the 70s. Three tones adorn the dashboard layout. You have a hue of grey, light grey and dark grey shade, all of which looks typical Nissan. In fact, these AC vents and doorknobs have been borrowed from the Micra. Now, there are a lot of features inside the cabin that the GO has given a miss to keep the cost significantly in check. For instance, the glove compartment doesn't get a lid, which could be a slight bit of an issue if you plan to stock it with munchies for your everyday commute. The grab handles over the front seats have been left out, and each door gets an individual control for its own window. The audio system is pretty basic too, no radio, only auxiliary and a USB port that is strictly for charging. You also get a quirky phone holder that is integrated within this so-called audio system. The positioning of the gear shifter is quite good, and because it is here and because the handbrake is also positioned on the center console, it liberates quite a bit of space between the two seats. Now what Nissan has done is they've used this space to extend the front passenger seat into a bench. Now that again is 1970s or 80s or maybe even 90s. And because there is provision only for two seat belts, Nissan insists that this additional space is only for additional luggage and not for a third passenger. So with the front seat set to my driving preference, there is not generous but enough knee room. Foot space is good, under thigh support is good, especially for a car of this category. I think this is a decent amount of space in the rear seat. The Datsun GO hatchback is powered by the Nissan-derived 1.2-litre KB12 petrol engine. Now it's essentially the same mill as the Micra, but the state of tune is different. It inches more towards fuel economy. It produces 68 PS of power, which is slightly lesser than what you get in the Micra. but the torque output is the same, 104 Newton meters. Fuel economy is claimed at 20.6 kilometers to a liter. Now, when the Datsun cars were in their heyday, they were known for a good performance as well for the kind of price that they came at. And this particular vehicle has a bit of that DNA, because 0 to 100 is claimed to be 13.3 seconds, which is pretty quick for a car that is running on entry-level specifications. Now, this fuel economy and the kind of acceleration that it gets, this balances basically thanks to the overall construction, because this vehicle weighs only 769 kilos. That is actually making it the lightest car in its segment. The engine is mated to a 5-speed manual gearbox. It's essentially the same unit that you get inside the Micra as well. Now, the gear shifts are quite precise, but the gearbox feels a little notchy. And I particularly like the placement of the gear shifter. The instrumentation also features this very intelligent gear shift indicator. Now, it doesn't show you what gear you need to be in like most other cars do, but instead you have these markings on the instrumentation where it suggests at what speed you need to change into which gear. The Go hatchback has a good ground clearance as well, 170 mm, and it's evident when you look at the car from the outside because the wheel arches look big, the tires look small. There's a good suspension travel as well. Now, it is good for broken roads or slightly off-road surfaces, but don't get too optimistic because the engine doesn't get a sump guard. So if you hit anything, you're going to be in a fix. Now, despite the high ground clearance and the long suspension travel, the vehicle doesn't provide any sort of an unnerving feedback. The Go hatchback does have a fair bit of body roll, but it is not unnerving when you're tackling bends or making those high-speed lane changes. And the suspension travel is quite good, so it does soak up most of the undulations that the Indian roads have to offer. The seats are quite quirky, but then they offer a good ride comfort as well. So overall, the cabin for this particular class is quite good, no complaints so far. The Go also features a speed-sensitive electronic power steering unit. It does weigh up well at highway speeds. At city speeds, it is a little stiffer, it is a little heavier than something like a Hyundai or maybe a Tata, but it is quite convenient. It's not too heavy, and for your everyday chores, I think this does a very good job. In recent times, we have appreciated Nissan for the way they have been speccing their cars with safety features. However, the Datsun GO doesn't get any airbags, no ABS, not even as an option. That is, of course, a downside. Nevertheless, the braking is quite good. 80 to 0, doesn't take a big distance. The wheels do tend to lock up, but there's no vigorous direction change. However, on half-wet surfaces that we have experienced in Hyderabad yesterday, the wheels do tend to lock up again and the vehicle does seem a little unnerving. But unless you're going too fast, you shouldn't have any problem with the braking. Datsun is going to price the Go very competitively. In fact, they are saying that it will be significantly under rupees 4 lakh. Now, unlike other cars that have a cheaper price tag where the cost cutting is evident, in the Datsun, the cost cutting is not that evident. It's some clever engineering, like the exhaust muffler, for example. It doesn't exist. You have a long pipe. And we talked about the handbrake or the seat belts, even the tires. They are low-cost tires that are imported from Indonesia. So all this is basically clever engineering for cutting costs. And that doesn't really affect your everyday driving in any way. Now, when the forefathers of the Datsun brand established this company, they called it DAT. Now, these 3 letters came in from the initials of the founders, but they also used these letters to create the punchline for the brand, which stood for durable, attractive and trustworthy. So how does the Go hatchback deliver on these counts? Durability, well, the way it has been built, the fit and finish, I think it's going to withstand the test of time quite easily. Attractive, the design is smart, trendy and good looking. And in terms of trustworthiness, the Datsun GO is going to be built by Nissan, a brand that is synonymous with the trademark Japanese reliability. So if you ask me, the Datsun GO checks all the right boxes. All they need now is proper visibility and a good dealership network.